Good times. Hey, everybody. We are live. Woo! So if we get a little bit of feedback from the people that are watching externally, please let us know how the sound sounds. And then we're going to get started as we got people filing in. We got a few more RSVPs that have not arrived yet in person. So we're going to let that kick off. How do we sound, everybody? Can I get, it looks like we got viewers live. Let me know how, let's see. You can hear the coffee. All right, cool. Just making sure the stream is all good. Checking. I think we're doing it, people. I think we're doing it. All right, yeah, we're looking good. Cool. So, all right, I will get this kicked off since we are recording, streaming, and we have people live. So if you're here in person, pizza's free. Feel free to go in the fridge. Everything in the fridge is drinkable. It is officially the afternoon, so you can have the beers if you like. We also have an espresso machine and cream, sugar, and whatever else you need. So here's the presentation. Am I stuck on my belt? All right. So if you don't know who I am Kurt Wooker Jr., but I should probably, let me preface this. I've given this presentation probably 20 times, but I've never done it with a slideshow. So I feel like it's maybe going to throw me off slightly. But I've given this presentation at a couple of universities. I've given it in front of a couple of investment groups, basically just explaining not just Bitcoin, because I think it's really difficult to explain Bitcoin unless you get a little bit of predicate knowledge about money in general. What is money? What is the technology? There's so many fields of study that go into Bitcoin, like economics, philosophy, game theory, just human interaction. And that kind of stuff really matters. And I think a lot of people either focus on just one aspect or they completely go past it and just talk about like, hey man, here's why you should buy Bitcoin. It's a huge opportunity. And both of those things really tick me off. So I'm broadcasting live from the South Florida Bitcoin Citadel. It is a space that is kindly sponsored by Bitcoin Association. So thank you to them. And thank you to everybody that shows up, comes to the events, buys stuff and everything else. You make all of this possible. So thank you if you're watching too. Also, please like, subscribe, hit the alert bell if you're watching us on YouTube, and share this across social media to let them know this is happening live. I do see your comments. So if you want to comment on Twitter or in YouTube, I will see your comments, questions, and all of that jazz as well. Also, there will be sats given away via hand cash on the BSV blockchain, which is my favorite version of Bitcoin. So if you are interested in getting some hand cash sats, there will be a demonstration at the end at which you receive money. So if that wasn't a greater incentive, you get a free presentation, free food, and free money. So we're really laying it on thick today. So let's talk a little bit about me, just so you know why the hell you would even care. I'm Kurt. I am the chief Bitcoin historian at CoinGeek.com. What is a chief Bitcoin historian? Well, it is the chief is to delineate me from the lesser Bitcoin historians, and then to specify I am not an Ethereum or a I'm just kidding. This is a really bad joke already. I'm the founder here at the Bitcoin, South Florida Bitcoin Citadel. I am the CEO of Gorilla Pool. I've been in Bitcoin since 2012, and I've been mining since 2013, off and on. I consult a lot in the space, both in the finance side as well as technical, specifically in hardware and networking. I have a background in cybersecurity, IT, business management, business logistics, marketing, and media. I've actually been broadcasting since 2003, if you could believe it. So you can see me sort of regularly in places like Fox Business, NBC, and more. Those are my credentials. Go ahead and Google them. Doesn't matter. So what is Bitcoin? Here's what we're going to be covering. We're going to talk about the history of money. We're going to talk vocab. So when you get guys that start talking about SHA-256 and hashing and distributed consensus and all these things, most people are already lost, right? What are these things? We're going to talk vocabulary. I'm going to go through what these things mean, why they impact everything. And then we're going to go over basic function. How does the network actually work? What is occurring when you participate in Bitcoin as a user, as an investor, or as a piece of infrastructure? So by the end of this, you will be not an expert, but you'll be able to talk about Bitcoin better than most. I promise you that. So would you believe Bitcoin's story starts here? So you are looking at a Sumerian cuneiform tablet. Do you know what this cuneiform tablet says? Well, it is discussing a defaulted loan and how to pay it back in silver with interest, because some guy stopped making his payments to the bank in, I think this one is Babylonian, but I could be wrong. There's a few different versions of cuneiform, but it's curious. When people talk about the history of money, you will get people that will straight up tell you, well, money started when people needed a better medium of exchange for barter, and maybe the chicken guy wanted to buy blueberries, and so blueberry guy didn't want chickens, and so they couldn't come to price parity. That's actually all nonsense. We have no idea how money rose up. There's a lot of theories. There are a lot of people that will die on the hill of their theory, but the evidence shows there's very little history of money at all. In fact, our earliest history about money starts here. It starts with a complex debt instrument and interest paid on a defaulted loan. So we already have a complex credit system. This is going back, let's see, ancient Sumeria. This would be pushing 4,000 years ago now. And so that means that proto money, or whatever we think of as like, hey man, we're trading seashells, maybe these buttons have value and this kind of thing, that's all theory. And if that occurred at all, that happened in antiquity. We do not know who the first guy was to try to standardize things. Now, I'm an American Numismatic Society member in New York City. It's the oldest numismatic society in the country. I think it's the second oldest in the world. I'm one of the lucky few who has been welcome to look inside the vault over there. So I have seen, and in some cases handled, some of the oldest evidence of money ever. Jill Brandsburg is the director over there. We've become friends, delightful people. But it's curious because you talk to him about like, yeah, but this is a unit of account. This is the half unit of account. This is already pretty complex. He's like, yeah, because that's what you start with. Evidence starts with the ability to calculate evidence at all. And so we don't really know when money started. He's another guy with plenty of theories. He can tell you the common theories, but that's really all they are, unfortunately. We just don't know more than that. Here's another interesting piece of money. This is called a rye stone or ray stone if you're from the Midwest. This is from a Micronesian island out in the Pacific. That is a piece of money. It's probably 5 or 6 feet tall. It's carved out of a specific piece of stone, out of a specific quarry that they would do on another island and bring these pieces of money back to their island. And these were used as collateral. They didn't move them. You just knew, hey, this guy owns that big rock over there and that's worth X amount. And therefore he is credit worthy up to the value of this big rock. Weird, right? So we don't know when that started either. That's just because they don't even keep written history, or they didn't until very recently. It just kind of always was with them. And in fact, there was a credit crisis created on the Isle of Yap when European powers started to debate if they were going to participate in such a system. So we're literally talking 1800s German, Dutch, and British, if I recall. And I might get this wrong, but I think Lloyd's of London manufactured the largest one and crashed their economy by introducing too much inflation into the Yap economy with a big rock. Okay, so money's weird. People are weird, and money is super weird because people are super, super weird. Let's fast forward a little bit. Roman currency is, because the Romans were great at keeping records, a piece of currency that we have a lot of history about. We know how they did it. We understand how their banks worked. We understand even the politics of people that were pro-bank, anti-bank, anti-debasement, people that liked or didn't like inflation, people that wanted sound money. There were all kinds of political factions that, frankly, look a lot like the conversations you'd see on Reddit or Twitter today, talking about, hey, man, I don't want your money. I don't want your stuff. But the interesting thing about Roman fiat is that it started much like many other monies that we have in history, in that the dollar was a weight of measure. I say dollar because it's me being a weird human, but they had weights of measure that had certain values, and you could buy a certain amount with them. But what they would do is, if it was gold, you could pull some of the gold out, you melt it back down, put a little more silver or copper or whatever, and you start to debase your own currency. Or they would even do the thing where they'd clip pieces off of it. So if a $10 coin was all you had and they couldn't make you change, and you wanted to buy something that was less than $10, you just kind of eyeball it and you take a big spike and a hammer and chop the thing in half and say, okay, now it's $5, right? So again, bucks, dollars, this is me just using units that I think people might appreciate. But What they realized is that that was problematic for its own reasons, and so was using units of weight as your monetary value. That had its own problems. And so they figured out, what if we just tell people what it's worth? What if we just decide that if it's got this king's face on it, it's worth $1, and if it's got that king's face on it, it's worth 2, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so then they realized that, well, then we don't have to use precious metal really at all. We can just throw copper at everybody and put a different king's face on it, and then it has this value. So that's an interesting problem, had its own politics associated with it as well. Moving about 1,000 years into the future from there, because it was just kind of a lot of that. Rome had its own thing, Eastern and Western empires, rise, fall. You had the religious, the irreligious, you had the Catholics, you had the Orthodox. They all had their own wars, Holy Roman Empire, all these other things were created. When Rome fell, when Rome fell, it created a really interesting power vacuum for currency. Like what is the fiat measure of value? Because who is the king? I might live in Normandy and he might live in Burgundy, and this person lives over in Naples or whatever. Well, so what happened is wealthy families started to establish what we think of today as the proto versions of commercial banks. The biggest one was the Medici family, which is probably a name you recognize just for all kinds of reasons. But the gentleman in the red hat is the head of the House of Medici, created what is essentially the first commercial bank that looks like we would think of a commercial bank today. So your typical lending, credit systems, settlement for other kind of payment structures, et cetera, savings and loans, that kind of thing. Moving forward, so it was about a 200-year period where lots and lots of things changed very, very rapidly. Because the Medicis started pretty rich, and then they got very, very rich because, well, lending is a really profitable thing, especially when there's lots of weird regional currencies and people want to fight about it. And then, okay, we can start to sponsor militaries and some of these things. This brings us up into 1700s Vienna. Now, the Viennese people, the Austrian people in general, but then also the grander Renaissance and post-Renaissance people really saw themselves as quite fancy. They did not want to be the barbarians of old, thinking about grandpa. Grandpa used to cut the heads off of people and drink out of them. I'd really like to go to college and that kind of thing. It was kind of the first stretch into doing that in Middle Europe. So this is when German-speaking peoples really changed from being that and wanting to establish a true cultural center in places that it hadn't before. Now, Paris and Rome were like this much earlier, but as you push north, it was much more barbaric until much more recently. Well, in Vienna, they saw themselves as an arts cultural center, and they also were a finance center. The interesting thing is that the Rothschild family started as the Bauer family, which, if you speak any German, a Bauer is a farmer, which, you don't think of wealthy elitists with the last name Farmer as a rule, which is why the name Rothschild was come up with. It's German for red crest or red shield, essentially. But what they did is they figured out that lending to individuals, while profitable, also had the problem of, well, when they default, I might not be able to collect the collateral, and the collateral might be encumbered in ways that we didn't realize. Now we're fighting with people. We're basically having this weird arbitration problem with other entities in the area. And they figured out, hey, if we were to work with the government here, if we were to lend directly to the crown first and let the crown distribute currency that can then be settled at Rothschild Bank, that limits our risk really, really well, because the government can just say, hey, we're going to send the tax man. They're going to knock on your door, like, pay your damn bill. If you don't pay the bill, you can go sit in jail, or you can die, or whatever. Depends which country you were in. But the Rothschilds saw that as a great way to manage the money of the empire. And so they pitched it to governments as a beneficial solution to, hey guys, we can super professionalize. We can loan to you at preferential rates, and then you can lend it out to other people at different rates. It becomes profitable. And frankly, whoever gets money lent to them cheaper can grow faster. Wouldn't it be really great if you were better than Prussia or France or some of these other places? And so it very quickly became a race to establish central banks because they were a very powerful vehicle for governments to make themselves very rich and very powerful very quickly. Well, that obviously had a backlash because there were people Well, there were two major things. The first one is this is still sort of late Holy Roman Empire era. And so there was very much an attitude. We hadn't quite gotten away from the attitude that the crown was an extension of the cross. Like it was very, we're Christians, I'm a Christian king and all these things. The Rothschilds are a Jewish family by blood. And so that had a little bit of a, hey, what are we letting happen in our culture? And there was a lot of backlash on that kind of thing. And it even holds on to today with sort of the banker conspiracy stuff that you will hear occasionally on the internet. But the interesting thing is that the mutual benefit to the crown and the bank making each other more powerful together, it bothered a lot of people for a lot of reasons, not the least of which was the fact that, like, hey, I'm broke and I want to blame somebody. And so now there's boogeymen around every corner, and you know how politics goes. But the benefit was the fact that, hey, it did actually finance an extreme professionalization of our culture over the course of about a generation. And so there was a weird balance of people that really had a giant backlash, both positive. So I say backlash, which sounds fundamentally negative, but it was I think Hegel would call this thesis, antithesis, synthesis, where it just kind of went back and forth and back and forth. And on the way up, everybody's like, hey, we all kind of fought this war, but all of a sudden, like, we have industrial capitalism, we have global logistics, we have a pretty functional banking system, and we have all these things. So it was real convenient to say, hey, man, I've been screwed. Because remember, just a generation before, it was like, hey, man, grandpa used to wear wolf skins and have to go, you know, he'd come back without a leg. And now he's a blacksmith in a nice town, and like we're all doing pretty well. So this is actually pretty. There are a lot of analogies today of like the wealthy college kids that are complaining about, hey man, capitalism isn't fair, right? It's like, yeah, you just told me through your iPhone on Twitter. So it's like it's one of those things. Here we have the Bank of Amsterdam. This was actually the first commercial bank in Europe that became a central bank. So they grew into becoming that. I was going to try to avoid putting the air conditioning on, but I'm quite warm if you want to put the air on for me. This is mostly just for the photo. It's a cool building. It is a piece of history, so Google it. This is the Bank of England. The Bank of England is a really interesting one because it was one of the earliest established gigantic commercial banks. There was an interesting change between what was City of London, which is actually a corporation within the city called London. A lot of people don't realize that London is a word that was established by the Romans. We don't know what the word means, but Rome created a company called London in the place that we think of as London today. And we don't really know what it did except for facilitate trade. And then the city of Westminster and the city of London merged and became a giant city called London. Confusing stuff. The history is super wild too, but this bank was created to sort of bridge the gap between a bunch of these things. Issue currency. It was great. They got really good at issuing fiat currency as well. Can you guys still hear me okay? We good? Cool. And so within a generation, so this was mid 1700s when Meyer Rothschild created central banking as a concept. By 1809, Rothschild and his sons were the heads of the major central banks across all of Europe. So he had a son in Paris, he had a son in London, he had a son in, I believe it was Amsterdam and Frankfurt, and some other one. I forget the last one. But it basically allowed them to manage the finances of all the major powers and sort of offload that from what was thought of as, they had a lot of terms for it, but what we think of as like a treasury secretary today in this country kind of became a proxy between the government and the central banks. And they created all this new stuff, which, you know, critics will say does nothing but finance war, but truly it financed everything in the country. And in many ways it was great, especially if you were a beneficiary. And then again, the politics of not liking the concept. So as we make our way into the 1800s, late 1800s and into the early 1900s, you had these people. This is Ludwig von Mises on the left and John Maynard Keynes on the right. Keynes came a little bit after Mises, but they do have some crossover in their lifetimes and their philosophy. Mises was very much a believer in, hey, rather than having money distributed by fiat, which is to say the king creates the value, says the value, and therefore can inflate your money to death or whatever, Mises said, hey, you know, there's a lot of good stuff about banking and economic velocity, especially commercial banking and issuing of currency. But he had this belief that currency should be issued by private entities and backed by something that you could actually measure. So he really was looking back at, hey, gold was pretty good. If you can prove that it was real gold, then proving that it was real gold has a ton of value, because a really nice suit costs the same amount of gold now as it did 100 years ago, even though the fiat measurement price keeps changing. Now, we understand this today. If anybody's looked at the price of gas or eggs or some of these other things around us today, you know, these numbers are going up as more money enters the system. The value of each individual unit of currency, the purchasing power goes down. So Mises was a major theorist, also out of Vienna, also from a Jewish family, and coming at it and saying, hey, the whole conspiracy theory about central banking and all that stuff doesn't really make sense to me. But the really exciting thing is that, hey, we should take all these great lessons that the Rothschilds brought to us, that they created, that they experimented with, and we should treat them as this opportunity to maximize the output of industrial capitalism by having loans that are collateralized, issue currency that is known to be collateralized. We're technological enough, and this is like late 1800s, and he was talking about, we have the tech to do banking right. Well, Keynes, not an Austrian, Keynes is a British gentleman, had a lot of very different theories. He was coming up with his own super optimizations on the other direction. So Keynes made a point of saying, hey, it doesn't really matter what anybody wants money to be. We can establish what money is, and the thing that backs it is power. And because the thing that backs it is power, well, we can just use it to continually make ourselves more and more powerful. I promise this is a Bitcoin presentation, by the way, people. This is just, it's important to kind of understand the predicate concepts that go into money, and where we have been the last couple thousand years to get there. But Keynes had this notion that basically inflation can go on forever, and what's good for the empire is good for the people. And as an American, I will also complain about the price of eggs and inflation and some of these things, but at the end of the day, I'm really glad I live in the United States rather than Ukraine or Russia or Turkey or you know, about half the rest of the planet, frankly. And so I am that rich kid sitting in a nice place complaining about the government while wearing my nice clothes and talking through my Macintosh and, you know, the whole thing. So you know, a lot of this stuff is ultimately about perception, and it's about optimization. So in Britain, let's wind forward another dozen years or so. This is Alan Turing. So this is where we're going to start to talk a little bit about computation and how the computer revolution sort of met with the monetary revolution to create the predicate technologies for Bitcoin to exist in the first place. And there's a really interesting thing here. Alan Turing, British, brilliant computer scientist, mathematician, and basically the founder of computing, the way that we think of it today. This machine that you're looking at is called the Bomba machine. This thing was designed to crack the Nazi Enigma code. So if you know anything about Nazi cryptography, it was at the time the most advanced technology in the world. In fact, the Nazis were the most technologically advanced military, intelligence, communications, and a lot of other things. They were a very formidable enemy to freedom in the world at the time. And the way that they were able to communicate encrypted, and it made it that it didn't matter how much you monitored their radio or try to gather intelligence. It's just gobbledygook. So how do you break the gobbledygook down? How do you reverse crypto? Well, they put Alan Turing on it. It took them a couple of years. What this machine does is it's a guess and check machine. It is checking, okay, is this the cipher? No. Okay, is this the cipher? No. Okay, is this the cipher? No. This is the only way to break a hash. You have to brute force the hash. You have to figure out, okay, is it still gobbledygook? Yes. Is it still gobbledygook? Yes. You might get very, very lucky, and all of a sudden, the thing that outputs on the end is readable words, and that's fantastic. What a revelation. Problem was he had no place to start other than the German alphabet, the German language, English. They didn't even know if they were doing it in German. It would have been very clever of the Germans to say, let's just do it in Italian and then encrypt it, because who would guess that, right? And you don't know. And the machine, here's the other problem, is that the Enigma machine was very easy on a daily basis to change the cipher. So even if you cracked it one day, you'd have to do it again the next day. And it was impossible. It was too much work. until he discovered, they didn't even discover, it was actually obvious in hindsight, Nazis are very systematic people. And they closed every single transmission with the words Heil Hitler. And so it gave them a piece of the cipher. It said, you know what? Let's insert that as the last few characters and see if that can backfill all your H, E, I, L's and all of that. When they did that, it turned from a problem that they could not crack inside of a day to a problem they could crack inside of 10 minutes by brute forcing. This machine, for all intents and purposes, is a mining machine. This is an application-specific, not integrated circuit, which is what an ASIC miner is. You can see I have an ASIC miner up here on the shelf. It's an obsolete one. This is for cracking Bitcoin hashes or it's a brute force machine. That's what that thing is up there. This is one of the things that secures Bitcoin, anyways. But this machine was a revolution in computing. In fact, it put Great Britain on a path to being the center of computing for a generation. It really wasn't until the 1980s is probably when the shift actually happened and it became an American thing, and then very quickly a Japanese thing and everything else. But this guy, Alan Turing, national hero, except for the fact that he was a homosexual and he was chemically castrated and died in shame because of the laws in Britain at the time. And so basically saved the world for freedom and invented computing, and he was inconvenient in some ways, and the government decided to throw him out with the trash because that's how things work sometimes. And so bit of a tragedy there with Mr. Turing. So that led to some culture. Really, it started in the 60s. You sort of had the hippie movement that was about freedom from a very left-wing perspective generally. That freedom and communism are inherently intertwined. It was kind of a popular idea in the late 60s in the West. And then in the 1970s, you had some guys that started to use this technology that was worked on initially by Alan Turing to start to create some of this new predicate technology, things like PGP keys and digital signatures to say, hey, I can use a communication channel that I can't trust, and I can send you a message over it. You can confirm that it was me because you have my basic identity, you have my private keys, you can decrypt a message on one end. So these guys here, David Chaum created the first digital currency. You have Ralph Merkle, who created the concept of the Merkle tree, which is a way to take lots of data and put it into a structure that you can validate and understand, basically standardize the way that data can be stored. Martin Hellman and Whitfield Diffie were partners. They created the Diffie-Hellman, basically the concept of public key cryptography, which is used in basically everything today. So these guys are heroes on both compute. It's important to note that most of these guys were also deeply political, sort of a libertarian bent generally, that computers are going to save the world, the internet's going to save the world, free speech really matters, our ability to communicate should bring us closer together. If you've spent time on Reddit or Twitter, you realize they might be more wrong than right, but I think their hearts were in the right place. Then they bred a group of people that we remember today called the cypherpunks. Now, a lot of people will tell you that Bitcoin is a fundamentally cypherpunk technology. And in some ways, there is validity to that, but I think it's way overblown. Cypherpunks definitely worked on Bitcoin after it was released. Hal Finney on the right here is a guy that actually used the first functional proof of work in a spam-related system. So think about all your spam email. Most of the email generated on Earth is spam. We don't want it. You don't need to see it. It's just a waste of your time. Hal Finney came up with a concept to filter spam. He called it RPow. Implemented it, very simple, but it was this concept of, hey, what if instead of just letting everybody fill my mailbox or requiring money to fill my mailbox, that I only let you put something in my mailbox if you do a dance the way that I want you to do the dance. So it's this weird, hey man, do a weird thing, and then I'm willing to let you waste my time, because it must have been worth your time if you're willing to be a goofball about it, right? Then we got Tim May, who wrote the Crypto Anarchist Manifesto. It's a very short piece if you want to read it. It's pretty interesting, talking about the way that cryptography will bring about freedom. And John Gilmore, I believe, was the founder of the Cypherpunk mailing list and created a lot of this stuff. They were featured in Wired magazine at the time. This group is now, we're breaching the 1990s here. You can see most of these guys are gray-haired. They started in the 70s and got popular in the 90s. And then 1999, here is a Ludwig von Mises fellow, which if you remember from a few slides back, Ludwig von Mises was that monetary theorists believed in the power of cash and gold as cash, collateral, and all these things. Milton Friedman is a Mises fellow of sorts. I believe his economic theory is called monetism, but he was a big fan of cash as a concept, monetary velocity in creating powerful economies. He's a really, really interesting fellow himself. And in 1999, said this: well, the one thing that's missing but will soon be developed is a reliable e-cash. Not a digital gold system, not a digital account system or credit system. We had these things in the late 90s. He wanted a digital cash system. He thought it was very important for people to very trivially be able to send pennies, quarters, dollars to each other, do micro-commerce on the internet the way that we might do a yard sale or something in our real lives. An important aspect of freedom in his estimation. So we're finally getting to the Bitcoin stuff. Thank you for your patience. I hope it's been enjoyable thus far. The MetsDAO.com cryptography mailing list has this as its home page. It has looked like this for 30 years. It's a very simple website. It explains, hey, we're here to talk about cryptography. You can veer off slightly. If you veer off too much, we're going to nuke you from the board. So keep it crypto, which in the 90s, who's doing crypto? Well, it's like 100 people on earth that are doing it professionally. These are the guys that are working in the pre-internet boom internet. They're trying to figure out how to even do password management and cryptography while having these new systems in which nobody is an expert, communicate with each other, and actually make commerce easier rather than harder, which at the time it was probably harder, much like Bitcoin still kind of is today. It's like, yeah, I would do that, but why wouldn't I just use my credit card or Apple Pay or something, right? So, interesting group. October 31st, 2008, Satoshi Nakamoto, a guy whose name none of them had ever heard before. This small insular community, cryptography experts and people that work in security, cybersec, infosec guys. Previous message you can see is forward from the SHA-3 lounge. SHA is, I believe it's secure hashing algorithm. So this is all, this is some real nerdy stuff. Like you think the stuff is nerdy today. It was super, super nerdy in 2008. And he says, I've been working on a new electronic cash system that's fully peer-to-peer with no trusted third party. The paper is available at bitcoin.org/bitcoin.pdf. Main properties: double spending is prevented with a peer-to-peer network, no mint, no trusted third party. Participants can be anonymous. New coins are made from Hashcash style proof of work. The proof of work for new coin generation all powers the network to prevent double spending. Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Cool, right? Actually, no. Most of the people on the board were like, first of all, who are you? What's a Satoshi Nakamoto? Are you actually Japanese? Okay, I just read your paper. Here's all the reasons this doesn't work. Reminds you of the internet today, right? The hey man, here's why you're an idiot. Also, I'm a mod and you're banned. So it's actually it's very, very internet nonsensy. The majority of these conversations are still public. If you want to go check out the cryptography mailing list, you can just scroll through them. You can watch the first guy, James Donald, telling Satoshi all the reasons this doesn't work. Well, here's why everybody would need to run a full node, and here's all this stuff. Satoshi, very kind but very dismissive, said, you wouldn't get it, bro. And the reason why is you're all crypto nerds. And while we use cryptography a little bit for key generation, it's an economic system that makes this all work. Bitcoin is actually notably simple. Cryptographers didn't like it. They don't like the fact that they don't use cryptography to make an exponential security curve and all these other things. Satoshi liked race conditions for everything. He wanted everybody to be competing. Like we're all in a sprint, which is irritating to guys that are, not necessarily industrious. They like to sit and be software programmers. So when he's doing this alpha male, like, no, to secure the network, it must be this thing. It's a little bit like, hey man, we've been working on crypto a long time. Crypto actually fixes this. Satoshi disagreed. And it really started as a fundamental disagreement with these people on day one. There was also the issue of, hey, are you actually one of us? Like, we all use pseudonyms. Who are you actually? Come on, bro. Like, have you had dinner at my house before? This kind of thing. So it's a lot of interesting stuff. Then the weird theory started almost immediately. Is this an individual polymath? And then you get the guys debating other. No way. There's no way it's one guy. It's got to be a team. And then people analyzing the code once the code came out, like, no, this is clearly written by one guy. Then you got is it the NSA? Is it the CIA? Is it, all these other things? But there was also a very curious community. A lot of people found it very, very exciting very quickly. So you get guys like Mike Hearn, you had guys like Gavin Andresen that came in a little later. You had Laszlo Heinz, you had Marty Malmy, some of these guys that came in immediately and were like, you know what? I'm going to let this guy talk because this is curious. And this has failed a bunch of times before. It wasn't the first cryptocurrency, wasn't the first eCash, wasn't the first anything. There were dozens of attempts that failed. But Bitcoin was novel, not because it was a new invention. It actually was a bunch of old inventions pieced together like a new puzzle, new rules on the board. Pretty exciting stuff. So the first thing Satoshi mentioned was, hey, I solved the double spend problem. Anybody know what the double spend problem is? It's kind of a computer science term, but it really is it's a computer science application of a real world problem. For those of you who are older, and most of us are a little bit older, you may have written a check in your life, right? You ever written a bad check? Have a check bound? No, not me. No, it's always no. Nobody's ever written a bad check, right? So it's curious because if you write a check and you don't have the money and then it bounces, most people don't get in trouble unless you did it on purpose and you do it a lot. Most people bounce a check at the grocery store and they're off by some insignificant amount. You make it work. You pay a bounce fee to your bank and whatever. You get back. You move on with your life. But similar things happen with Visa or other payment systems. There's database corruption. There are things that make it. Oh shoot! I got paid twice. Why did I get paid? Like who screwed up? Well, when you do it at the bank, all you got to do is talk to the person at the bank who mitigates these things. Is don't worry, we'll fix it. Same with Visa. Same with PayPal. There's just a guy that can fix this. Problem with Bitcoin is, and all distributed systems, is that the state of the ledger, the state of the system, there is no central party. There is no mint. There is no guy at the middle of the network that can say, hey, yeah, we made a little mistake. We're going to arbitrarily change it. Don't worry, you're fine. We're insured for it, whatever else. So how do you solve that problem? How do you get a bunch of people who, in most cases, probably don't know each other to agree that a state should change for all kinds of reasons? Well, that's super complicated. It's a game theory problem. But why did Bitcoin exist in the first place? This is what the headline on the Bitcoin white paper looks like. So this is Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer electronic cash system. Also available. If you take the math out of it, it's only like 6.5 pages long. So if you haven't read the Bitcoin white paper, but you're curious about Bitcoin, it'll take you all of about 10 minutes to give it a once over. And unless you're into cryptography, you really don't need to read the math anyways, so don't worry about it. It reads really well. It's really simple. In fact, here's the introduction. Commerce on the internet has come to rely almost exclusively on financial institutions serving as a trusted third party to process electronic payments. I have already misread this a little bit. While the system works well enough for most transactions, it still suffers from the inherent weakness of the trust-based model. Completely non-reversible transactions aren't really possible since financial institutions can't avoid mediating disputes. The cost of mediation increases transaction costs, limiting the minimum practical transaction size and cutting off the possibility for small, casual transactions. So Satoshi, he's talking about internet commerce, which at the time, this is 2008. eBay, Amazon, like these things existed. How could you make those payments? Credit cards and PayPal. That's really all there was. There were other regional payment solutions, but there wasn't a ton of them. Credit cards and PayPal were your options for commerce on the internet. But he explained, and just like you're aware, you can't really spend $3 with a credit card or PayPal. They have a minimum fee. They have a minimum transaction size. There's issues with micro-commerce. He's saying, okay, with Bitcoin, these centralized systems are too expensive to use. With Bitcoin, we can lower that ceiling or raise the floor. Which one would it be? We can make it cheaper to do a transaction. And wouldn't that be cool? The white paper goes on to explain a whole bunch of things, how you can audit the network, how you know the supply. There's a curious amalgamation of some of these principles we talked about, the sort of Mises, gold as money concepts, but also these frictionless payment systems, and also this global auditability but then put together with these things of proof of work. Like I said, Bitcoin itself was only novel in the fact that it was a bunch of things that were pieced together very cleverly. Individually, there were not inventions in Bitcoin. Bitcoin isn't itself a big invention. It's literally a set of rules. It is an idea that is implemented with other people's ideas that are put together. And that's definitely an oversimplification, but it's fascinating in that it's simple. It is its simplicity that is its power, just like a lot of things. So what is a hash function? What are we doing with hashing? This is where I get into vocabulary of Bitcoin a little bit, just so you can understand what's actually happening in the network. So SHA-256, SHA literally stands for secure hashing algorithm. So it's 256-bit secure hashing algorithm. That's what it means. Simple concept, unless you just know absolutely nothing about computers, which is okay. But what the dog approves. So a hash function takes data and it compresses it down to a predictable format. So a long string of numbers and letters. And if you have the key to unlock it, you can unlock that data forever. You can reread it, or you can send it to somebody else and give them a read key that allows them to read the data forever. And this can be as simple as writing your name in a function and hashing it. The hash will look roughly the same. Or you can take all of the data in the Smithsonian, all the digital data in the Smithsonian, and you can hash it with the same algorithm, and a similar looking string will come out. So it is an attestation of the existence of that specific state of all data, no matter how big or how small. It's hashed. It uses that hash function to make a very predictable series of hashes that you can then follow. They fall into Merkle trees. Thanks, Ralph Merkle, who was a few slides back. And then you have this very simple data structure that allows anybody on Earth to access it, audit for themselves, take a peek. So hash functions are a crucial compression and security tool in Bitcoin. So what is the Bitcoin network? I'm using a graph. I run a mining pool. So I've got my mining pool. The GP is Gorilla Pool there in the center. So think of that as my node. That is my Bitcoin node. That is the node that is validating transactions. It's receiving transactions. It is basically an in and an out for data on the network. And so is every other computer. So every other computer is receiving a certain amount of data, and it is sending back out a certain amount of data. What the job is to validate two things. Is this a valid transaction? Is this coin, did Zach actually own the coin that he sent me? Checking. Yes, he did. How can you trust me? Why would you trust me if I said Zach's coin was good? Well, we do it with a certain amount of proof of work. Remember, it was dancing at the mailbox, right? So I'm the idiot who's going to dance like a monkey and say, yes, because I have done this dance and I'm completely shameless about it and have the opportunity cost of looking like a fool, you can trust that Zach's transaction is valid. Well, that's still Zach could screw with me, right? Zach can maybe pay me off, like, Kurt, dude, here's $1 million to help me screw with everybody. Well, it's not just me. So imagine there's dozens that are doing the same thing. And all these people are saying, yep, no, we validated that. I validated that. I validated it. And everybody's doing the stupid little dance at the same time. Everybody's like, okay, there's no way anybody coordinated all of this for the sake of theft, right? So we have now attested to the near absolute likelihood that this is a valid transaction, and the network confirms it. Thank you. And because everybody, the way that the system works, it allows me to do business just as easily with somebody in South Carolina as it would be in South Korea or Karachi or anywhere else, because it's a global network. The nodes are everywhere. They're connected to the internet, and the validation can occur from anywhere and to anywhere on Earth that can receive data. Awesome, right? Now you can do business without the need for your credit card or your PayPal account or passing KYC. You're sending pictures of yourself to people. Hey, can I use this money payment service? I have to do a business trip to any one of the hundreds of countries on Earth, and that's a giant pain in the ass. So Bitcoin allows us to really reduce that friction and also trust the validity of the payments because of the structure of the network. What is a blockchain, or the blockchain in this case? What's a database? I think people basically know what a database is. You have a database on your hard drive, on your computer, right? So you got your your JPEGs and your video files and your operating system stuff. You got your secret folder that you don't share with anybody, and you got all this stuff on your database. It's probably encrypted. You can encrypt it better if it's something crucial. Pretty cool concept. So a blockchain is just that. It's a database. The difference between a blockchain and a standard database is the fact that it's distributed and then we're trying to come to consensus about the state of the ledger at the same time. So imagine me and you we don't know each other necessarily, but we have a peer connection and we have 99% the same transactions, but there's those few that maybe are in your bucket of unconfirmed transactions, and I have a few that are different in my bucket of unconfirmed transactions. And so what are we doing there? Well, we're using the Bitcoin network, and we're trying to do our little dance and say, hey, I think my block will be better than your block. If I reconcile this block first and with more proof of work and more people want to build on my block of data, then we have created a chain of blocks or a blockchain. I think that's a simple way to explain it, but basically it is forward only. The reason it's called a blockchain specifically is that it's not in a constant state of change on the database level. The reconciled blocks are reconciled for all intents and purposes forever. But you create a block of data and another block of data, and every time somebody builds on that block, it becomes a lot more difficult to reverse the data that is in previous blocks, and it just goes on forever. Now, this makes it really great for financial transactions or mission critical data and that kind of thing. It makes it a little more complicated for doing other stuff, but there are problems to be solved, and there are ways to attest value and connect value to other things that make it more feasible, more practical to do more things with a blockchain, but we'll get there a little bit later. Ultimately, it's a permanent ledger of all payments forever, so it makes for a really great money that can't be inflated or debased or whatever. Some of the stuff we were talking about maybe 20 or 30 minutes ago. What is a wallet? I actually think this is the most misunderstood thing in Bitcoin. So when I say, hey, I have a Bitcoin wallet, what is that? Are your coins in your wallet? Do you keep it in your pocket? Does it what does this mean? What is it like? I know what a wallet is. I have a wallet in my pocket that has my cards and cash and IDs in it. But that's not how a Bitcoin wallet works. Your coins are not in your wallet. Your coins are on the ledger. They're on the blockchain. What your wallet is actually doing is it works a little bit like a window that allows you to see the parts of the network for which you have keys. So remember we were talking about Diffie-Hellman and some of those guys before. They created this use of public and private key cryptography to generate what's essentially a mailbox or a view into a mailbox. And so your wallet generates your private key. Your private key needs to be kept safe. If somebody else has your private key, they can move your coins. It's kind of like not everybody in the neighborhood should have a key to your house, right? Maybe somebody you trust or whatever. And there's a whole bunch of politics around ownership versus possession in the Bitcoin space, but we'll get there probably the 200 level course. But for all intents and purposes, the owner of a coin is typically the holder of the key, but the key is the thing that unlocks a payment script that allows your coins to move from one spot of the ledger to another. And that's really all the wallet's doing. It can do other operations, it can read other data, but that's all tangential. That is all stuff that happens after it allows you to spend coins or receive coins. But those coins are not in your wallet. Your keys are. So you can generate keys, just so you know. This is what cold storage is for anybody that doesn't know. Create an offline wallet so you can take a phone. I love an old phone. Phones are pretty damn secure, especially modern ones. So wipe a phone, generate a new copy of your phone, download a wallet, and take that phone off the internet forever. When you do that, you can generate keys on that wallet, and those keys are offline. You don't ever have to put that phone online. In fact, once you've generated those keys and made a backup, you can make a physical backup of your private key or seed phrase. There's a bunch of ways to do private keys. Seed phrases are common. You can keep that seed phrase somewhere else. You can throw that phone in the garbage. Your coins aren't in the phone. They'll never be in the phone. But you're on the Bitcoin network. You have a public address in which to receive cash as a Bitcoin. So proof of work, we talked a little bit about proof of work, but let's talk a little bit more about proof of work because it really, really matters. It's also pretty controversial. You get the environmentalists that say you're just, melting the planet or whatever. And that's ignoring the solutions that are created by proof of work while only maximizing the costs. But that's not something we do with any other network. Nobody's, marching outside of Visa and saying, hey, you're killing the planet. It's like, well, yeah, but I need to pay for things, and this is my life. So what proof of work is doing is it's not just a technical process. It is, like I said, it's the silly dance. It's the peacock's tail, or it is the antlers on a deer. So think about peacocks from an evolutionary standpoint. This is my favorite analogy in Bitcoin, for what it's worth. Peacocks don't seem to make sense. It's a delicious bird with a gigantic tail you can grab onto. Like, think about where peacocks live. There are peacocks that live here in Florida. There's also jaguars, wild pigs. There's all kinds of things that can catch the peacock. How the heck did evolution choose for a peacock to have, in some cases, a 10-foot long tail that doesn't serve as a weapon or armor or anything else? It's weird, right? Well, the reason for it is because it's beautiful. And sometimes the world and evolution and other things are not just a math problem. Sometimes it doesn't matter that it makes them easier to catch, because it also makes female, the peahen, say, man, I'd really like to breed with the beautiful one. And that's enough for the peafowl to propagate from prehistory into today. It is its costly signal. It is a peacock saying, poof, here's this gigantic liability, but ain't it gorgeous? And it works. And so that's my favorite analogy for proof of work, because when you look at a mining farm and you say, man, it's really, really hot and really, really loud and cost a couple $100 million to deploy, and also you're the largest consumer of electricity in the county, and it's not profitable. Like, on a given day, because of the difficulty adjustment and all the reasons that Bitcoin works, Bitcoin is always razor thin. Is it profitable or not to mine? That's to make sure that you're doing it for the right reasons, that you're doing it because you care about the validity of the ledger and the security of the network. It is your costly signal that, you know what, I'm going to take a really big gamble and I'm going to go hang out in the jungle with a giant tail. That's what it is. That's what a mining farm is. Now, is it profitable over time? Yes, just like the peacock. They're still here over time. It's been super valuable. In fact, their tails have gotten bigger over time. Fascinating, isn't it? Just like the mining farms have gotten bigger over time. They get more efficient too. So here's the interesting thing about Bitcoin and the difficulty adjustment. If there's two people trying to account for the ledger on Bitcoin, we'll just call the difficulty 2. Should take 2 attempts in a 10-minute period to account for the ledger properly and build a block. But if it's 3, then it's difficulty's 3. If it's 4, difficulty. This is actually not the way that it works exactly. The math is wrong, and my critics will say Kurt doesn't understand Bitcoin, but it's good enough for the analogy. As more people come in, it becomes more difficult to account for the ledger. That's the difficulty adjustment. Bitcoin is always targeting a 10-minute reconciliation period. So a block is always going to be roughly 10 minutes from the last block. It doesn't matter if there's 1 million people mining it or 2 people mining it. It's going to adjust itself to work out to be about 10 minutes to guess and check. Is this the hash? Is this the hash? Is this the hash? Is this the hash? It's no, 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 yes. If it's yes, you built the block, you get the coins, you get the transaction fees, bam. If you got sufficient proof of work, you built the block, awesome. You're a Bitcoin miner. Super exciting, I promise you. The first time I ever built a block, I literally, my hand bounced off my ceiling. I was so excited. What's a mining pool? Well, I said it's difficult, right? I can't mine for it myself. You probably can't either, unless you got a billionaire and you can text them and say, hey, bro, can you lend me a couple $100 million? It's not going to make a whole lot of money. It's super, super risky. And the machines come from China and they got to come over ship, and tariffs really suck, and regulations are unclear, and we might get thrown out of the state. And, it's difficult, right? There's a lot of challenges here. Mining pools, a pool is just another piece of software on top of your node, your mining operation, that allows other people to collectively add their hash power, to say, hey, can I guess and check for hashes with you? So that's it. So this is basically what Gorilla Pool, my company, this is the structure, how it works. So we have a little bit of our own hash power. We're connected to the Bitcoin network. Our nodes are connected to our pool, but anybody can join our pool. It's totally public. So you can go buy, in fact, you want to buy one of these, not worth anything. They will lose you money. But if you want to buy one of these ASICs up here, this is a Antminer S9 from about 2017. You can plug it in, you can connect, you can solve hashes with us. You will be paid out relative to your contribution to the network on a daily basis. But you can also have a gigantic pool. You can have a huge farm and you get paid a ton of money for it. Just, it also costs you just about as much as you're earning at the same time. So you have to have a long-term view on the value of what you're doing. You have to have the ability to hold your breath in between every payment period and everything else. It's a real run. But for people that have been mining for years and years and years, they don't look poor. So it's a weird opportunity. All right, so how does Bitcoin work? This is a very practical 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you have your wallet. I hope you recognize my wallet picture that was here before. You broadcast your transaction to the network. Now, you can either be the sender or the recipient in this situation. If you're peer-to-peer, somebody could send from one wallet to another wallet and the recipient broadcasts it. Or if you don't have that kind of relationship, and many of us don't, you can broadcast to the network and say, hey, network, can you find my recipient, please? Here's his hash. Great. Nodes like mine, Gorilla Pool, or any of your nodes, they will gather these transactions and they will validate them. They'll say, okay, somebody's proposing to send these coins. Does he have the right to send those coins? If yes, these ASICs are constantly searching for a valid hash for proof of work. If they find that, then the block that they build, this reconcile block, is proposed with proof of work to be added to the chain of blocks, and you have added to the blockchain. Congratulations, you have earned Bitcoin. So you earned the subsidy of coins, which cuts in half every 210,000 blocks, which is roughly 4 years. So right now the subsidy is 6.25 coins plus whatever transaction fees are in there. Pretty great. What about disagreements? So this is distributed consensus, right? We've talked about all the ways that Bitcoin works really, really nicely and everybody's happy and everybody's making money. Well, it doesn't always work that way. There's a few reasons why the network can split or seem to malfunction or cause chaos. Well, it's not a malfunction. Like I said at the beginning, this could have been made cryptographically to work exponential security. It works 100% of the time, but then it takes away from the competitive nature. Bitcoin security is competitive, not technological, not cryptographic. There's aspects of those things, but ultimately it is the competitive aspect of consensus that makes it work. So if we're competing, that means there are winners and losers at all times. So a loser in this situation, let's say me and Zach both find a block at roughly the same time, within 2 seconds of each other, but we're on other sides of the network. Well, the nodes that are on my side of the network might say, okay, we're going to build on Kurt's blocks, but the nodes on Zach's side of the network are saying, cool, Zach found a block, we're going to start building on Zach's blocks, until they meet in the middle and they're saying, shoot, whose block do we want to build on? It's a thing that happens. This does happen not super regularly, but especially when there's a lot of traffic or there's congestion across the network. This is a problem that needs to be solved. Now, there's a few ways to go about it. Who has more proof of work contributed to the network at the time? Bitcoin should go with the version of it that, or go with the block that is contributed with more proof of work. You trust the guy that's doing the dance better, essentially. You trust the peacock with the more beautiful tail. He has more to lose. But it could also be, well, you know what? This one's already been propagated to 80% of nodes and Zach's only went to 20%. So even though Zach has more proof of work, maybe we want to build on Kurt's block because most of the network already agrees that it's his block. So we're in what's called an orphan race. One of these blocks will almost always die. And you lose. You lose on your opportunity cost, your electricity costs, and your investment in your infrastructure and everything else. That's your typical orphan race. Somebody falls off, Bitcoin goes on, all the other nodes say, hey, sorry, Zach, we liked your block, but we're going with the block that everybody else is already building on. That's the direction we're going. This is your typical orphan. Now, there's also disagreements. I want to spend a transaction that looks like this. Maybe the network is saying, you know what, we really don't like those transactions. We don't want there to be complicated smart contracts. We don't want to do business with the Chinese, or we don't want to, there's all kinds of reasons to say, I don't want to build on your block. There's political reasons, there's technological reasons, there's competition reasons even. It could be, Ford and Chevrolet it's like, you know what? I don't want my stuff bumped out for my competitors' information. And so you can have a disagreement and you can have a permanent split of the database, at which point the nodes that decide to build consistently on a second chain are now working on something that is or isn't Bitcoin. It actually becomes a philosophical conversation. Which chain is Bitcoin now? Now this sounds silly, but this has happened a number of times. It's quite controversial. There are multiple competing Bitcoin chains today. I'm a big fan of Bitcoin SV because the stuff that happens at Bitcoin SV, I find more compelling. I like complex transactions. I want to create smart money that when I send coins across the network, they can have all kinds of other applications connected to them and do all kinds of other things. That's actually a really unpopular view. Most people want their Bitcoins to just be transfer of money. There's even a war going on right now in the BTC camp, the main, what people think of popularly as Bitcoin, and them saying, hey, why are you guys uploading JPEG content into Satoshis? You are creating second-class Bitcoins on the network, and this is causing me all kinds of problems. Well, it's drama. Well, there's always drama in Bitcoin. So they might have a split over it. There might be a version of Bitcoin BTC that allows for JPEGs and all kinds of other stuff, and then a version that is, no, we're keeping it real tight here. Which one's the real Bitcoin? There are rules. If you read the white paper, there are ways to determine which one is validated with the most proof of work, which one has, there's a bunch of things. There's a lot of ways to balance this out, but it's ultimately a philosophical question, and over time, we would argue that the market decides. What's the biggest disagreement? So the biggest disagreement in Bitcoin's history is about the block size limit. The first real threat to Bitcoin in 2009 and 10, this was real early Bitcoin era, was the DOS attack. So a DOS attack is denial of service. The reason you would have a denial of service is there's too much traffic. If you've ever tried to go buy Taylor Swift tickets, anybody? Taylor Swift fans? The second they hit the market, Ticketmaster crashes every damn time because there's like 1 million people that want to get Taylor Swift tickets, and there's probably only 50,000 of them available. And so within 30 seconds, the thing crashes. It doesn't matter how much cloud servers or anything you throw at it, it's going to crash. In fact, it's part of the marketing. It'll be, oh my God, Ticketmaster crashed. That's how popular she is, right? So Bitcoin at the time, 2009, and Bitcoin's running on people's laptops. This is not running on professional hardware. This is those cypherpunk guys and other people on the internet whose names you don't know saying, I don't know, I'm going to do this hobby project. It's literally on my work. At the time, it's probably your Dell computer sitting at the office and doing your things. And I'm going to be in trouble if anybody finds out I'm even doing this. And like we're making peer connections over net. Like everything about it is sketchy. And so it's very easy to DOS attack Bitcoin circa 2009, 2010. So what they did is they just inserted a throttle. It's a governor. It's like, the first time you hop on a motor, or let's say you go rent a motorcycle, and you get up to like 65 miles an hour and it starts going, blah, 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 blah. It won't let you go over 65 miles an hour. You're like, man, what the heck? I rented this bike. I want to do 90. Well, you can't because it's not your motorcycle and it's been governed. It's been throttled down. So that's what they did with Bitcoin. Satoshi Nakamoto, under the advice of Hal Finney, as the story goes, that Hal, who was a security expert, said, dude, just create a block size limit. There's a block every 10 minutes. So in order to stop the network from being taken down by too much traffic, just throttle the amount of traffic that can happen in a given block. There we go. It's just a very simple patch that solves the whole problem for us. We can revisit it in the future. And if you believe the account of it by guys like Ray Dillinger and some of the other people that have talked about this, they unanimously agreed. So Ray, Hal, and Satoshi all agreed this is a stopgap solution. We'll open the block size limit up as demand comes up. But right now it's like a baby in the basket. We're going to try to not kill it. But ultimately it's supposed to be a large commercially viable payments network, and we're going to have to rethink this. Well, that became the biggest political fight in Bitcoin's history. Satoshi Nakamoto, this is from Bitcoin Talk, which is a database of a bunch of conversations between Satoshi and a lot of other people, saying the current system where every user is a network node, this is the amateur thing, is not the intended configuration for large scale. That would be like every Usenet user runs their own NNTP server. The design supports letting users just be users. The more burden it is to run a node, the fewer nodes there will be. And those few nodes will be big server farms, not laptops anymore. The rest will be client nodes that only do transactions and don't generate. Client node would be like your wallet, your light node communicating with Bitcoin so you can send and receive transactions. That's it. That's all a normal person should be doing in the Bitcoin network. You are not supposed to be a piece of infrastructure. He says this, right? So at the time, mid 2000s, early 2000s, if you were going to start a business, you'd get a domain. You'd probably buy yourself a small server because you're going to run your own email and all this stuff. You run your domain and you serve your own data. Who does this anymore? Nobody. Email has professionalized sufficiently that people use cloud service providers, and that's it. Everybody that bought a server in the early 2000s has sold that server because it costs you like $10 a month to just have Google do it. And Google's success rate is 99.999999% uptime, availability. It just works. So why would you do anything else? This is very much how Satoshi, and this is what he's describing right here, is that you're not supposed to run Bitcoin in your closet. You should just be a user, much the same way that we're Gmail users today. So you do not need to be infrastructure in your own network. Then he scolds everyone. A lot of people celebrated. WikiLeaks very famously lost all of their incoming payment solutions because they were a very politically contentious, sort of news organization, but they were putting out leaked information. If you guys know who Julian Assange is, he's very popular for living in other people's embassies for basically the last decade because to the American government, he's a traitor, and to the British government and to some other people too. But to a lot of other people, he's a hero. He's a freedom fighter. He's a guy that's giving information that the world deserves to know. Well, payment processors are going to do what the law tells them to do, and they're going to say, no, we're not letting Julian Assange just receive PayPal and Visa and whatever. We're cutting you off. People said, hey, what a great opportunity for Bitcoin. You can't stop Bitcoin. Well, Satoshi says, no, don't bring it on. The project needs to grow gradually so the software can be strengthened along the way. I make this appeal to WikiLeaks not to try to use Bitcoin. Bitcoin is a small beta community in its infancy. You would not stand to get more than pocket change, and the heat you would bring would likely destroy us at this stage. So people will say, oh, Satoshi was a cypherpunk. He was an activist. He was these things. Doesn't sound like it. Julian Assange was an activist, and Satoshi right here is saying, I don't like that at all. Do not bring it on. Curious. Then he disappears. All of a sudden in late 2010, there were other people on the project. Gavin Andresen had taken a role. There were a bunch of new people that were interested in working on Bitcoin. He sends this email to Gavin. He'd been working his way out, like he'd been more and more scarce over the year 2010, which was only the second year after Bitcoin was released. And he says, I wish you wouldn't keep talking about me as a mysterious, shadowy figure. The press just turns that into a pirate currency angle. Okay, he didn't like pirate currency. He didn't like Julian Assange. He didn't like WikiLeaks. He doesn't like being a shadowy figure. Why do people always make Satoshi out to be this sort of hacker figure and all these other things? Well, it's the other guys. You saw the guys with the beards and the hoodies and stuff in the other pictures. That's who those guys were. I think Satoshi, I mean, he's telling you right here, not pirate currency, not mysterious shadowy figure. Maybe instead, make it about the open source project and give more credit to your dev contributors. It helps motivate them. So Satoshi gives us this tool to do global commerce, micropayments. He's talking about commerce on the internet, disrupt internet commerce. Let's put PayPal and Visa out of business. He had that conversation with one of the developers named Mike Hearn. He explained to him before Bitcoin even launched, if I recall, and says to Mike, we can beat Visa today. We're faster, we're cheaper. Is Bitcoin faster and cheaper than Visa today? Does anybody tell you this? No, nobody's using Bitcoin for payments in this way. Why? Why is this happening? It's curiosity. Well, in 2014, this is about 3.5 years after Satoshi, quote unquote, disappeared, we find out that Satoshi's email had been hacked. We don't know when it got hacked, But in 2014, somebody who had control of Satoshi Nakamoto's email addresses started trying to blackmail people as Satoshi. He sent to moderators of all the important forums. He started emailing some of the other developers and basically saying, hey, send me money, send me Bitcoin, or I'm going to reveal Satoshi. I got him by the balls, basically, was the attitude that was had. Yeah. So weird stuff. Here's the sophomore class. These are the people that sort of took over Bitcoin after Satoshi disappeared, got hacked, the whole thing. Like, man, Satoshi's gone. Now what? Now who's in charge? Gavin, the guy all the way on the left, is the gentleman who was given the keys. He said, Gavin, you're the lead developer now. It was Gavin who he sent that email to. Like, hey, stop talking about me as mysterious, shadowy figure. Run your open source devs. Make Bitcoin cool. It's in good hands. That was it. No more Satoshi. Gavin Andreessen, super nice guy, super soft guy, unfortunately, immediately distributed the keys to power to a bunch of other gentlemen. So you have Peter Wheel, Peter Todd, Luke Dash Jr., and Gregory Maxwell in this picture. They all have different opinions about what Bitcoin is, how it should go, what is the roadmap? Should it have a roadmap at all? Is Bitcoin perfect? Does it need to be fundamentally re-engineered? It's bickering, it's politics. All of a sudden, there's a group of people in charge of the repo of this extremely complicated piece of software, and they're bickering about the way to make it go. It's a giant pain in the butt, unfortunately. Well, most of them, the gentleman in that photo, so you got Peter Wheel, Luke Dash Jr., and Gregory Maxwell. So the guy with the hat on did not join this group at a business level. But if you look at here, all of a sudden, big money shows up. MasterCard. MasterCard starts an incubator called Digital Currency Group. Digital Currency Group is designed to invest in and steer the roadmaps of Bitcoin and whatever other emerging technologies are coming out of the blockchain space. And so who do they put in charge? Well, they got guys from Bain Capital. They got the Treasury Secretary for Bill Clinton and the National Economic Council Director for the Obamas, and the chairman of, or he was a chairman for the Federal Reserve. He was a candidate, sorry. He was a candidate to be chairman of the Federal Reserve. Remember central banking and that whole thing? So all of a sudden, there's this big money out here talking to these independent, distributed developers, guys in hoodies that are working a day job, working at like the Linux Foundation or working for some the contractor doing software work, and they're saying, hey guys, you want a really good salary to be a professional Bitcoin developer? No strings attached, right? There's never money attached to strings. So, or strings attached to money. Anyways, so we get these guys that establish a company called Blockstream. Blockstream is a professional Bitcoin infrastructure development company. Those guys were hard line. Hey, we need to make sure we just keep turning stuff off on Bitcoin. Bitcoin isn't designed to be internet money. It's not designed to be a tool to be transacted a lot of. You want to do big transactions, important transactions, maybe the kind of stuff that you would like sell a gold bar to pay for, but it shouldn't be cash. You shouldn't be buying the proverbial cup of coffee, which reminds me. You wouldn't want to buy coffee because you have to store that transaction on the ledger forever. Remember, you can't reverse a transaction. You can't nuke a transaction. So if you buy coffee with Bitcoin, the transaction data for that coffee is there forever. Literally in 1,000 years, you can go back and say, yes, John bought a coffee on this date. And they said, that's so frivolous. Why should we do that? We need to strip all this stuff away, keep Bitcoin small. It's an investment opportunity. Let's create payment layers and stuff that all settles to Bitcoin. By the way, we're going to be commercializing these things. We also own Lightning Labs and all your custodial services and all these exchanges and all these other things. So they, in my opinion, very clearly undermined Bitcoin in order to control it. There's a lot of money to be made by controlling it. Then the doxing. I mentioned Satoshi lost access to his accounts and all these things. And it sort of started to balloon in 2014. So there's all this stuff going on with Blockstream. And then there's all this weird stuff going on with Satoshi's identity and his reputation and his history. So there's a sort of a refactoring of who is Satoshi and what is he. Read this threat. This is the threat from the hacker to Satoshi Nakamoto. So your docs, passwords, and IP addresses are being sold on the darknet. Apparently you didn't configure Tor properly. And your IP leaked when you used your email account sometime in 2010. You are not safe. That's something you want to hear from somebody on the internet. You need to get out of where you are as soon as possible before these people harm you. Thank you for inventing Bitcoin. It sounds like a threat to me. I would feel threatened were I to receive this email, especially from my own account. That's what happened here. So these things were posted from Satoshi's accounts across a number of places, including the Bitcoin repo, the peer-to-peer foundation forums, and other places. Here's Thamos. His name is Mike Marquardt in real life, but he posts about it and saying, hey, I just got an email from Satoshi. Isn't this weird? Same kind of thing. Hey, this guy's trying to extort me, blackmail me. By the way, anything that comes from this account is now like, can't trust it. Super weird. So people have said, well, maybe the guy just, Satoshi didn't pay his bill and it expired and somebody took his email address. Well, Peter Todd, who was one of the guys you saw on a previous slide, and a serious Bitcoin developer at the time, no, he got a forwarded email from 2011. So this guy had access to Satoshi's whole email box. How much information would somebody know about you, your secret information, if they got into your email account, your main email account? Pretty bogus, right? Especially if you're trying to be a pseudonymous creator, you didn't really want your identity known. Now somebody's in your mailbox, they're trying to blackmail you, they're sending threatening messages to your colleagues and maybe some people that aren't actually your friends and all kinds of other stuff. All of a sudden it gets very, very complicated and pretty junky. This really sucks. Somebody out there knows who Satoshi Nakamoto is, that pseudonym that was designed to protect the creator and to keep Bitcoin a neutral, fairly distributed money. Now that's been broken. What happens next? So this gentleman is Dr. Craig S. Wright. He's an Australian computer scientist, polymath. He's got doctor's or master's level degrees in economics, and game theory, and math, computer science. He owned the most important computer forensics business in Australia. He was working with the Australian and UK governments, hunting hackers, hunting human traffickers, and working on digital cash systems for casinos in the APAC region during 2005 to 2008. And then all of a sudden he gets up and leaves one day, and late 2014, 2015, in this era, moves his stuff to the UK, starts moving around a bunch of assets. He's got some things going bankrupt. He's got some weird issues with the Australian tax office because, wouldn't you know it, he filed Bitcoin on his taxes in 2010 for his 2009 tax return. Filed a bunch of R&D tax credits to the tune of millions of dollars, if I recall, which at the time, imagine 2010, this is the year after Bitcoin was created, and you receive a tax credit request for lots and lots and lots of money, and nobody on earth knows what it is outside of the maybe 200 or 300 people on the internet that have ever heard of Bitcoin. Well, that's Craig Wright. That's the man you're looking at in this picture right here. I believe it is very clear that he is Satoshi Nakamoto. This is the man that wrote the Bitcoin white paper, came up with the game theory, and solved these systems. Now, that is probably the most unpopular thing I have said in my career or on this stream or anything. There are people hitting the ceiling right now as I'm saying Craig Wright is likely Satoshi Nakamoto. The reason being is that Craig's critics, these people, the sophomore class of Bitcoin, all the hoodie guys, all the beard guys that you saw, they don't like Craig Wright. They don't like what he stands for in Bitcoin. They don't like that he calls out Blockstream and says, hey, their vision of Bitcoin is completely invalid. But what they really, really don't like about him is the fact that he won't just quote unquote prove he's Satoshi Nakamoto. And the way they want him to prove it is either by moving a coin from the Satoshi stash. We know that Satoshi mined some amount of Bitcoin during its infancy. And therefore, if Craig is Satoshi Nakamoto, he should have these keys. He should be able to prove he's Satoshi very trivially by moving a penny or by doing a public key signing of a message and saying what that message is. He hasn't done that. Now, he's got a million reasons why he hasn't done that. And I should say every one of these slides could be about 100 slides, and this presentation could be like 50 hours long. I'm going to spare you guys. Also, if you guys are hungry, feel free to get pizza and stuff. If it's in the fridge, you can consume it. Pizza was hot when I put it out. Should still be hot. Feel free. We're almost done with this presentation, I promise you. So Craig Wright is, in my opinion, I think it's very clear that he's Satoshi, but it's not one of those things that it's just, hey, man, you square the circle and crystal clear. Here it is. Now, the interesting thing about him is that even after he was outed, and he was indeed outed by Gizmodo, actually I have the list here, Gizmodo and Wired Magazine, and he was raided by the Australian Tax Authority on the same day. So when Wired and Gizmodo, which are two huge tech publications, say, is this man Satoshi? We've come now to learn that there was an anonymous hacker who had all kinds of information about Craig Wright taken from somewhere, who was trying to extort Craig for information. Said, if you don't give me your information, I'm going to publish your identity with these magazines. Well, I think it's pretty obvious that there's some relation to the 2014 hack and his 2015 outing, as well as all this information being handed over to the Australian Tax Office, for which there was a ton of complication. But Craig has spent the last, now it's going on 8 years. He had already moved to the UK, actually, by the time his home was raided. His home was, I don't know if abandoned's the right word, but he wasn't in there when they showed up. He had already moved to London, and he was working on the establishment of a company there. I think at the time it was called Encrypt. Today it's called Enchain. He is the head of R&D at the largest Bitcoin research and development firm in London. He's got about 300 people on staff. They are working on scaling Bitcoin, how to make Bitcoin faster than Visa. What does it look like to make smart contracts and tokens and all these other things over Bitcoin? What does it look like to put an overlay network on top of the network so that you can connect Bitcoins to every single piece of data in the world? And so Craig, who won't sign as Satoshi and he won't move the coins to prove he's Satoshi, he just keeps doing the dance. He just is out there saying, I'm just going to keep investing my time, my reputation, my money. I'm going to raise money from other people that are interested in seeing Bitcoin as this vision. And he's basically, for lack of a better term, working his ass off to show that Bitcoin was always capable of replacing not just Visa, not just PayPal, not just MasterCard, but all of them, as well as the ISPs and everything that's running the real internet. That the internet today is an internet of silos, and that if you replace it with Bitcoin, a peer-to-peer network, that you can give the world the freedom that it's been fighting for now thousands of years of control in money, communication, and everything else. And so Craig is, in my opinion, shows that he's Satoshi Nakamoto by doing that dance, by doing the proof of work. His reputation and the vitriol, the amount that people hate him for who he is, in my opinion, is his peacock tail. And that's why I think he is Satoshi Nakamoto. Again, super contentious. So what became of all of that? So with the fight between what I call the small blockers, these are the 1 megabyte Bitcoin forever, Bitcoin is just for simple, big, expensive payments, versus the Bitcoin is for everything. Here's kind of a laundry list of people that were involved in the journey and the splitting and all this other stuff going on in the Bitcoin economy. So you got Mike Hearn on the left, Gavin Andresen, Amaury Sachet, Roger Ver, and then Dr. Craig Wright all the way on the right. So they created different implementations of Bitcoin, different experimental things like, hey, will this work on the main Bitcoin network? Will this cause a fork? Like what's going to happen if we try these things? Well, all the people on this list were really interested in trying new things and doing big, cool stuff with Bitcoin. And they just consistently were picked off, edged out of the community in some way and whatever. Each one of these guys, their stories are fascinating. Every person on here really deserves their own documentary, frankly. Ultimately, there were 3 emergent versions of Bitcoin that are competing for global SHA-256 hash power. Remember I said that orphans occur? Like there should be a single Bitcoin network and the others should be orphaned. This is still the case. So between 2017 and 18, Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin SV split from the Bitcoin Core network over various disagreements on various things, and they're duking it out. So Bitcoin Core BTC has that 1 megabyte block size limit. If you do a bunch of funny tricks, you can get up to 4 megabytes, but it requires a lot of very specific things. So it's good for 7 transactions a second globally. Just like nothing. Like it might as well be 0. It's a soft protocol, meaning that it is governed by whoever proposes new software. If people accept it and they run it, cool. Bitcoin looks like this now. Doesn't sound like gold to me. I can't change gold. I can't even get everybody on earth to vote in agreement to change gold in a certain way. It doesn't change the fact that gold is gold at an atomic level. Even specific gold is specific gold. Not all gold is the same. atomically you can measure. This is my gold and this is your gold. It's all gold, but that's the beauty of Bitcoin, is that it allows you to follow the chain of every single Satoshi from when it was mined until you've received it. It's beautiful. But if the protocol can change all the time, well, okay, yesterday my Bitcoin looked like this, and tomorrow my Bitcoin looks like that. Doesn't sound like gold to me. This is my political position on Bitcoin. This is why I do not like BTC Bitcoin, because developers propose a change and they would say, yeah, but we don't control who runs it. But it's just like the people here. You guys ever read the terms and conditions when your operating system says, hey, it's time to upgrade? Who reads them all? Come on, somebody who reads all of them, right? No, nobody reads all of it. If you do, you're probably at the wrong event here anyways. But nobody reads it. And so if you got a group of guys who are, the geniuses, these are the technocrats, these are the guys that have the power, these are the guys that understand Bitcoin, they say, hey, time to upgrade. Well, the industrial guys are saying, I don't know. If Ant Pool upgrades, we'll upgrade. Okay, F2 Pool is going to upgrade too. Cool. Foundry Pool is going to. We're just going to follow. So it's not an audit process by the people that are running the software. It's literally, dude, if I don't upgrade, I'm not on the main network. I'm just going. So that's what happens. That's the problem of a soft protocol. Bitcoin Cash split off, raised that limit considerably, up to 32 times as much throughput. So it's good for 150 to maybe 200 transactions a second. Still not a lot globally. Visa does about 6,000 transactions a second globally on a regular day. They do about 60 or 70,000 transactions a second on Black Friday. So Bitcoin Cash is not feasible as a cash system globally, certainly not on Black Friday, but not even on a regular day for a single network. Just isn't an option, doesn't work. It also has a soft protocol. So they have what's called the CHIPS system, which allows their developers to propose changes. So your Bitcoin Cash might look like one thing yesterday, it might look like another thing tomorrow. Not different there either. That's what I didn't like about my fiat currency, is some guy somewhere changes it and everybody says, I could fight it, but I'm not reading the terms of service. Now we got Bitcoin SV. So Bitcoin SV is what I like. It's what I advocate for. Again, political position, take it as you will. The interesting thing about Bitcoin SV is that all of those things that you could possibly change, all the swim lanes, this is what people argue about, right? So let's take a really politically contentious issue. Abortion. In a Bitcoin presentation, right? When does life begin? Everybody's uncomfortable, right? We don't know. It's not really up to us to know. The science to know doesn't exist. And so it'll always be a politically contentious issue. And maybe that's okay. It gives us something to fight about. So now the interesting thing here is with Bitcoin, how much Bitcoin can go across a network? We don't know. It's the same as how fast can a car go? How far can a rocket go? Like these are qualitative questions to they're quantitative questions to a qualitative problem. Well, I don't know. If we create a better fuel source and better aerodynamics, maybe a rocket, maybe it doesn't even need to use rocket propulsion. Maybe you can bend space-time and go anywhere in the universe instantly. We don't know. Somebody's got to come up with it. Maybe we'll figure out when life actually begins in the womb scientifically. Maybe we'll say, you know what? Right there, that's when it's a human. Maybe there will be a definition for that someday. We don't know. So what Bitcoin SV did is it said, okay, we're going to take all of those swim lanes out. We're going to take out all of the arbitrary. So there are laws today that we've written about. When does life begin? Well, that's a state-by-state question, right? So if you go to New York, it's, hey man, you can have an abortion until X day. And it's very different than what it would look like in Alabama because they've decided on the swim lanes for their network, their state, their people. There's an answer for them. Is it scientific? No, just like it's not scientific in Bitcoin Core or Bitcoin Cash. They've said Bitcoin can do 1 megabyte in 10 minutes. And this other one has said Bitcoin can do 32 megabytes in 10 minutes. Well, Bitcoin SV says, you know what? We're taking the swim lanes completely off. How many are you willing to try to put across the network? That's an interesting question, right? I'm the one with a node on the network. Maybe I want to try to mine 50 gigabyte blocks. What's the risk? If I fail, if nobody builds on my block, I'm the only one that lost money. But if I have a really big client, maybe I get a call from Visa and Visa says, hey, we'd really like to do blockchain settlement for our entire global network. Can you put that up in 18 months? Say, well, shoot, can you guys front me like $50 million and we'll do our best? Okay, let's get it done. Maybe the block size is 50 gigabytes on average every 10 minutes. And then I can say quantitatively, Bitcoin can do 50 gigabyte blocks every 10 minutes. But it's a competitive thing. How many times have I talked about competition in this presentation? Satoshi didn't like the math. He didn't like the cryptography. He didn't like the hard, fast rule and exponential this and that. He said, you know what? I want people to compete. I want to see how friggin' big will the peacock's tail get given all these other scenarios. It's like Darwin's jungle or whatever it is. Darwin's plan. I don't know. I'm not an evolutionary biologist, but it's competition. Bitcoin SV is built on the premise that people have the right to try to do anything on a public network. Because why wouldn't you? Who owns it? Who owns the Bitcoin network? Well, you can come and go as you please. The white paper is very clear. You don't have to stay. You don't have to come. You can come. Anybody can come. You just have to follow the rules. If you break the rules, the network kicks you off. It's great. It's competitive. It's exactly like reality. It's exactly like evolutionary biology. Be the peacock. Can you be the peacock? Well, only if a peacock can exist in a 1 megabyte block on BTC or a 32 megabyte block on Bitcoin Cash, or maybe it can be the biggest bird in the universe on BSV. I am a BSV advocate, just so you guys know. So if you guys would like a demonstration, feel free to use your phone to scan the QR code. It will download for you the Handcash wallet, and I can send you a penny. Anybody interested? We can also do this offline. Should we wait? I'm going to move on because we're at like 90 minutes here. If you guys want to buy Bitcoin, if this is why you're here and you wanted a presentation about, hey, dude, buy crypto, get super rich, I am not that guy. I do not care if you buy Bitcoin. I think you should earn it. Exchanging dollars for Bitcoins, sure. Over time, it's worked really, really well for people, but I think it's really important not to broach the I'm giving you investment advice situation. But if you want to buy any of those versions of Bitcoin, BTC, BCH, or BSV, Bittrex will sell them to you if you're a United States citizen. Have at it or don't. So that's my presentation. Does anybody have any questions? Is there anything that I can illuminate or elucidate for anyone in the room? Yes, sir. When Moon, man, we're already there. Most of the Bitcoins ever have already been mined. It's made a lot of people very, very rich. I think the most important thing, I want to see disruption of the global economy in that I can actually do business with somebody just as easily in South Korea as I can in South Carolina. When it doesn't matter to me what part of the planet you're on, for me to do frictionless penny level business, that's When Moon. That's when we've won.
What should someone do after they download Handcash and get a penny?
So set up your Handcash wallet. The cool thing about the Handcash wallet is that there's an entire app store built into it. So you can log into various social networks. You can use Bitcoin as your keys to log in. So say goodbye to passwords and stuff forever. Bitcoin key, this is a cool thing about cryptography is your fingerprint is an attestation of your identity. You can use it to log in. You can use it to pay to post. You can be paid directly through it. It's peer-to-peer payments. You can also join things like, there's Haste Arcade. You can sit and game. You can sit and do, you've got a couple of apps yourself. You want to play Ask Happy? Zach over here's got an AI thing. So all these people, Chat GPT, if you don't want to pay the 20 or 30 bucks a month, you can pay 4 cents pay per click and access Chat GPT and a bunch of those AI art tools, and it's 4 cents a click no matter what. That's micro commerce. I always say the best version of this, you ever have somebody say, oh my God, and send you a link to the New York Times and you're not a New York Times subscriber? And then it's like, well, it's $6 a month. And you're like, okay, I guess I could afford $6 a month for this really important article. But then you go to log in, it says, well, it's $6 a month if you pay for 12 months at a time. And now you're at, okay, now I'm talking about $50 with fees and all. It's just like, I just wanted to read one damn article. So imagine if you could just pay the penny or pay 3 cents or whatever and just read one article. This is the kind of thing that Bitcoin allows you to do at scale. So that's an example. You can't do that today, but the technology exists. Somebody just got to go make the deal with the New York Times, and all our lives are simpler. Any other questions? We can call it. We can end it. I'm happy to end the stream. I could use water and coffee and a bathroom break. Cool. All right, everybody. I'm going to end the stream. If you're watching on the stream, thank you so much for your time. Please like, subscribe, hit the alert bell, and share with your friends who want to learn about Bitcoin. Delightful, everybody. Take care.